Are you freaked out by the idea of applying water slide decals to your models, knowing the stakes are pretty high in achieving the look you're going for? Boy, I certainly was. But at some point, you just have to commit to screwing them up until you figure it out. Otherwise, you're not going to advance in the hobby. So I'd like to share with you the tips and techniques I've learned in my adventures to effectively apply decals to my models without causing too much stress. I think we all know when done correctly, decals can be just that finishing touch, that extra little thing that breathes life into your model and tells its story. I don't recommend starting out on a big, complicated model that has a lot of small details. Pick something that has a good number of different sized decals, but isn't a make or break project. Now, I don't know about you, but this is a hobby for me, so really, none of my kits are make or break. But I do have my favorites, and right now it's this A10 Warthog. And I got right up to the point where I needed to add the decals and froze. But now that I've got a few kits under my belt, I've come back to tackle it with a lot more confidence. So let's start with exactly what is a water slide decal and what makes them so frustrating to work with. At its most basic, decals are nothing more than a thin plastic film with details printed on it used to decorate an object. Yeah, decorate's the right word. These things are not just used on model kits. You can find them on, coffee mugs, guitars, and even fine furniture. The decals come adhered to paper backing with a thin water-based adhesive, and they are fragile. In order for them to appear like they're painted on the surface and not just another sticker, the film they use is very thin and it can wrinkle and tear at just the slightest touch. So, with that horrifying thought in mind, let's start with the tools and supplies we're going to need. In the tool category, and these are in no particular order, an X-Acto or hobby knife with a brand new blade. I like these number 11s. They're long, thin, and have a very sharp tip. A small pair of fine scissors, and these are to cut the decals out with. I find, especially in larger ones, they give me more control over a hobby knife. 2 or 3 small brushes, and these are for different purposes. This one, I'm using this one for the setting solution. It's a short bristled natural hair brush, and then I've got this is a flat brush that's also very soft to apply the softening solution, and then just an extra little one to poke at things if need be. I like to have a toothpick ready and maybe even a little larger little pokey thing there. Also tweezers. Fine point tweezers are a must, especially for these little tiny decals. They give you a lot of extra control, and especially when you've got big fat fingers like I do. I also like these kind of reverse tweezers. They're very handy. On the supply side, you'll need a bit of water in a shallow dish. The container should be appropriate to the size of the decals you're working with. It doesn't need to be a lot, just enough to completely soak the decal you're using. Warm water helps, but it's not strictly necessary. Even if you start with warm water, it's going to be room temperature before you're done. So, Also, I have an alternate method of weighting the decals. I think gives me a lot more control, and it involves this piece of glass, and we'll get into that. Your setting and softening solutions. This is from the company Microscale. It's the Microset and Microsol. This one's used pre-decal, and this one's used post-decal application. These are also a good necessity. Some Q-tips, just some standard old cotton buds, some paper towel, and some tissue. The tissue, you don't want the kind with lotion in it. You want just the plain stuff, or the stuff on the roll down the hall. Works great. Once all your supplies are gathered up, we'll set up the decal station. There is no real order to this. You just want everything where you can reach it without thinking about it too much, and while leaving enough room in front of you for the model. So about the model. There are different schools of thought on preparing the surface to accept the decals, but it's generally accepted that applying the decals to a gloss undercoat gives you the best results. Since the decals themselves are typically a little glossy to start with, applying them to a gloss surface lets them more easily blend into the background and helps to enhance that painted on look. I wanted to kind of butt in on myself a little bit here. The varnishes are not super critical. There are very expensive varnishes made by most of the companies that make model paints. They've got very fine quality products at a very fine quality price. But for beginning modelers or just modelers on a budget, which I count myself in that category, I use things like this. So this is a Deco Art, is a clear gloss varnish. You can use this straight out of the bottle, but I don't recommend it. I would thin it out, but I wouldn't thin it out with water. I would use just straight alcohol, like the 95% stuff like you can get at your local liquor store or in that can at the hardware store. That's the denatured variety. The Pledge Floor Gloss is great for spot treatments. If you're not going to be glossing the whole model and you just need a little spot to put down a decal, this stuff works great just straight out of the bottle. Just put it on with a soft brush and just in the area you want it, and then let that dry. I don't recommend this for all over treatments, especially through airbrush, because unless you're ventilating, because there's some nasty stuff in here. So you want to make sure you're take care of that. Then I like, and this is one of my favorites, is just this Rust-Oleum 2X Gloss Clear. It goes on really nice. It lays down good. I've not had any problem with orange peel. So these are all good, excellent budget options for gloss. But what if the surface is meant to be a matte or even flat like some military models? Won't that leave a shiny spot? Yes, it will. So you'll need to apply a top coat of matte or even flat varnish over the top to dull everything back out. I found this Rust-Oleum dead flat top coat to be very cost effective, but it's in a rattle can, so the usual precautions do apply. If you're going to be applying any weathering passes after the decal goes on, you may be able to skip the protective coat, but be mindful that even though these things are dry, they're still fragile and can be chipped off really easy and give away the scale of the model. If the decals are meant to be applied directly to unpainted plastic, then the gloss undercoat is typically not necessary, but you do need to wash the model in warm soapy water and not just soak it. You'll need to softly scrub it to make sure you've gotten all the mold release off of it. Mold release is just a fancy term for the oils and waxes they use to help the plastic pop out of the mold more easily. I just use a wet paper towel for this. Now, if the model's meant to be flat and there's only a few of them, I like to apply the gloss undercoat just to the area under where the decal will be rather than the entire model. But if there are a lot of them, it may be better to just go ahead and gloss coat the entire model. For this A10, given the number of decals, I just gloss coated the whole thing. Also, you're going to want to think about the order of operation and what steps you do when, like not installing any clear parts that would just need to be masked off before you could put a top coat. I'm pretty sure that's going to save you some time and aggravation. Now that the model's ready to go, we need to get the decal ready. As much as possible, I try to use scissors to cut the decals off the sheet. I think scissors provide a much better control when compared to a hobby knife, at least for me anyway. And to the best of my ability, I try to not to cut up the sheet into a bunch of little pieces that can get lost. But realistically, this isn't always possible, so just make sure you're keeping them in a safe, dry place when you're not working with them. And it's not always practical, but I also try to work from the outside of the sheet inward. Just be aware that a hobby knife, although it does a fine job cutting, doesn't have nearly the control of a small pair of scissors.
Learned that the hard way.
With most factory decal sheets, the individual decals themselves are already cut to size, and all you need to do is remove the paper from the sheet that holds the decal. But some aftermarket decals, the entire sheet is one piece of plastic film over the paper, so you'll need to cut out the decal as closely as you can without cutting into the artwork. So after all that, we're finally ready to start. We can now wet the decal by dipping it in the water for like a 10 count or so, and then leave it lying in a safe place while the water soaks into the paper and releases the decal from the sheet. This is what the saucer is for. Now, I don't recommend leaving it just soaking in the water. If you get distracted, the decal could just lift off the paper and become a free floater, and depending on the size of the decal, that could be the end of the decal. While you're waiting for the decal to release, we're not just going to wet the area with the setting solution, we're going to clean it. This stuff does a couple of things. First, it's acidic and will help to soften the decal just a little bit, and it also cuts any oils that may have been left behind by, I don't know, paint, fingers, or whatever, and helps it adhere to the surface better. Now, check the decal to see if it's released from the backing by ever so gently poking at it with a Q-tip or, well, a Q-tip. Keep in mind, it may not all release from the paper at the same time. One end may let go, but the other has not, so make certain it's completely free before you continue. Once it's ready, here's where the water slide part comes in. Using a Q-tip, or if it's a tiny decal, you can use a toothpick, or if it's large enough, just use your finger. You want to hold the paper in position where the decal is going to go, and then very gently slide the decal off until it's touching the surface, and then gently slide the paper from underneath the decal. It's probably not going to be exactly in the spot you want it, so you'll need to move it around. Very, very gently nudge the decal into the correct position with the appropriate size pokey thing. If it's not moving easily, add some more setting solution to help it float off the surface a little bit, so then you can move it around. Go slow. It is really easy to overdo this part and damage the decal.
Again, first-hand knowledge.
After it's in place, using a bit of tissue, soak up any excess moisture on the surface of the model and on the decal. Now then, using the fat part of the Q-tip, gently press down in the center of the decal ever so gently and start rolling to the edge. This will remove all the excess moisture and hopefully any air bubbles that's underneath it, and help it adhere to the surface. This is the most important step in the process, making certain all the liquid is out from underneath it and there are no air bubbles or wrinkles of any kind that could cause it to look like it had dimension beyond that of a thin coat of paint. If you find any air bubbles, say on a larger decal or even some of the smaller ones, this is exactly what the X-Acto knife is for. With that brand new number 11 blade, I very gently just touch the bubble with the tip of the blade just to barely pierce the decal. You don't want to drag it across the surface. Just cut into each air pocket, and this should hopefully allow the air to escape while you roll it flat with a Q-tip. Now, if you're on a dead flat surface, you can stop right there. Just let it dry for 24 hours before applying any additional coats of weathering or weathering treatments. If you're working on a surface with details like panel lines, rivets, or curves of a car body, this is where the softening solution comes in. After your decal has dried for a few minutes and you're certain that it's adhered to the surface, you can apply a coat of the softening solution. What this stuff does is it basically starts to melt the decal so that it will slump down into and conform to the shape that it helps enhance that painted on look. Here, I'm reading directly from the manufacturer's instructions. Apply microsol with a small flat brush. Apply with as few brush strokes as possible as to not disturb the decal. Then allow the decal to dry without disturbing it. One application is enough in most cases, but If necessary, a second application of microsol can be helpful. Now, you can apply more than two. You just need to make certain it's dry completely between applications, or you could end up damaging the decal. I mean, while this stuff's working, the decal's basically going to be the consistency of Jello. So don't try to move it or adjust it or in any way. Just let the solution work. Now, you want to let that dry for about 24 to 48 hours before applying any additional treatments. Drying time may vary based on your local conditions and humidity. So there you have it. Water slide decals may seem daunting at first, but with just a little practice and the right techniques, you'll find that sense of dread fading away, and you'll actually look forward to the challenge. Again, knowing the steps is not going to make you perfect, and I am anything but perfect, but I do actually look forward to applying the decals now as if it was just another part of the model. So go ahead, tackle those decals with confidence, and turn your model into that something special. Thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this demonstration, and if you like that, the playlist for the build for the A10 will be right here on the left. There'll be a video over here that YouTube thinks you'll like, and again, thank you so much, and go make something.